Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with host Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you never miss an episode. Search for us on your favorite podcast app, or you can find the podcast on jimmyhinton.org and findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so that you can spread the word. If you would like to support us and get exclusive rewards, go to patreon.com/speakingout. Find the tier that best fits you and join as a patron of the podcast. Let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast with host Jimmy Hinton.
And Jimmy's mom, Clara.
Episode 101.
Can you believe it?
I know.
It's wonderful.
It's nice, and we still don't have you a new chair yet.
That's all right.
101 episodes.
Jimmy worries about me in this chair, and I told him I love a straight back chair, but he's insistent he's got to get me a different one.
Hey, we did order you one, though, and it does have a straight back, so it'll be here any day.
Okay.
Then we don't have to hear your obsessant complaining.
This boy. Okay.
It's quite the opposite. I've tried to give her a chair for a long time, and she keeps refusing. So
this is what I use at home, so it's all right.
Okay, so this episode, actually the next two episodes, come as a result of a vast number of messages that both of us received from people saying, what resources are there for wives or spouses of abusers? And I cannot tell you how many times that question has come to me in the last 3 weeks.
Right.
And I don't have a good answer.
Well, the good answer is there are not a lot of resources out there, sadly.
Yeah,
and
that are specific for
wives of abusers, especially of sexual abusers. You know, they're wives who have lived in a home. They're the wife of a pedophile, and that's it. And I call this the Silent Wives Club. Yeah, you don't hear much of anything except secretly, like through emails, like to you and to me, and I'm sure there are others, asking, what do we do? Where's the help? Where do we go from here? How did this all happen? I don't know what step one should even be. Yeah,
and I want to make this distinction because I think this is really important. That's not to say that there are not resources for the wives or spouses of abusers who were themselves abused. Right. Because those organizations do exist. We have organizations that help victims of spousal abuse. Right. We're talking about people like you in a position where you were not sexually abused. No. You were not physically abused. No. Of course, there was the gaslighting and the mind games and things like that. Right. But you were not necessarily a victim of my father's abuse, your ex-husband.
Not the sexual abuse. I lived in a home where that occurred.
Right.
And I was abused in a very intellectual way, I'll say, and an emotional way, a priming of me so that I believe I wouldn't catch on to the abuse that was going on. So that's what we're talking about.
Right. So for people who are in your category, and I think there are lots and lots of you, what is there available? And if any of our listeners know of resources that are out there, support groups, be it books or organizations that are specifically designed to help the spouses of abusers, please let us know. We will link to that in our comments and on the website. I'll be happy to link to those.
Right. When I was preparing thoughts for this, Jimmy, I was thinking if 1 out of every 3 girls, that's an average, is abused, we can say more or less, we don't know for sure, and 1 out of every 5, there is a wife/mother to that child that's being abused.
Right.
Which means that person needs help too. And like you said, where do you go for resources? One of the first things I did when your dad was sent to prison was look online for help of wives of those who have been incarcerated. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what my what's my role now? I looked for help for wives. How do you explain to your children? How do you become suddenly mother and father? Your grandchildren? I printed off what I found, and it was like four little sections, paragraphs, and that was it.
Yeah.
That was totally it. I researched and researched and researched. I couldn't find what I was looking for. I just couldn't. And I know that there are probably millions out there who are looking for the same type of thing.
I would agree. Yeah. I've had many people over the years who were spouses. They were spouses of abusers, and they were saying, do you know of any resources that are out there for us?
Right.
And several people have asked me to try to persuade you to start a ministry, and I thought, well, your plate's kind of full right now. Not that you wouldn't like to
I am actually
do that, but
thinking of putting together a book at this point.
Yeah, I think it's needed.
Yes, for wives of children who have been abused.
Yeah.
It's needed. There's all kinds of help that we need.
Well, I wanted to walk through because I'm not in your position, so I can only imagine what it's like to be in your shoes. So I think for the sake of our listeners, I'm just kind of want to have you walk through some of the challenges for this episode, for episode 101. Right. What are the challenges that spouses of abusers face, that you personally faced? And then in episode 102, the follow-up will be, what do you do about it? How did you heal through this whole mess with having children of yours be abused? Not only did you find out your husband was an abuser, but you found out he abused some of your children.
Absolutely.
So, how do you heal from that? But for this episode, what are some of the things, if you could unpack that and maybe highlight some of the most pivotal things that you really wrestled with?
Jimmy. Of course, there's at once the shock, the disbelief. This is a person that you shared your life with. You shared your most intimate thoughts and feelings with. And this is a person who is loved and adored by church and community, respected among peers. And to find out, as was told me, this is my dark side. Your dad used that term. I'm sorry you had to find out my dark side. Well, that dark side changed everything to every portion of our lives together. Mm-hmm. It, for one thing, you feel, and I don't know how else to put it, but you feel dirty as a wife. You feel used. You truly do feel abused, that everything was a lie. You question yourself, the guilt. There is an ongoing guilt that I still deal with. It's getting better. I realized that I was primed and conditioned to not think of abuse, which I didn't. I don't know if it had happened now, if I would have been more, I'll say, educated and looked for things, but abusers are good. That. We've talked about it in episode after episode. Something that we don't often address that wives go through is when they support the abused child, they are distancing and cutting off ties with the husband, which is what happened in my instance.
And probably not only that, in your case, and I don't want to interrupt you, but in your case, he went to prison immediately.
Right.
That's rarely the case.
Rarely.
So when you take the side of your children, not take the side, but when you support your children, that same man who abused either those kids or other kids, doesn't matter, he makes your life a living hell from that point forward.
Truly. And which it was interesting for me because I worked in what's called this county building, which was adjacent to our jail. And
it's literally next door.
Yeah, we share the parking lot with the jail. My car was parked in the parking lot for those visitors who visit the jail.
Yeah.
So every day for 5 days a week, I pulled into that parking lot, and there was that constant nagging reminder that he was in there.
Yeah.
He did this. He's
he
there.
Was literally feet away from you.
Feet away from me. And there is a torment there that is hard to explain. Along with that, though, is you have to deal with the disbelief of your community. You have to be prepared somewhat to answer questions. I mentioned in another episode, I was called in for questioning. My job was on the line. My superiors wanted to know, what was my part in this abuse? Was I part of these lies? Was I part of this? It was incredibly hard to go through that because you're grieving so many losses, grieving the innocence of my children, grieving the fact that my children were abused in my home by my husband. That is torment. There are other things that happen immediately, and these things might not seem big to other people, but to the wife who is there alone suddenly, there are all kinds of adjustments emotionally, physically, and by that I mean financially. Suddenly, the income stops. Thankfully, I was a working mother and had enough income to keep our home and keep things going. Thankfully. Not every wife does, and I think people forget about that too.
Well, a lot of abusers keep them financially dependent.
Exactly.
So that,
that's one
if
of
the crap hits the fan, so to speak, that's less incentive for the wife to speak up or to defend the children or to turn him into the police or whatever, because they're desperate for the money. They need a house. They need a roof over their heads.
For themselves and their child or children. I'll never forget your dad's words to me. He said, I don't care if you and the kids go live in a tent. Go live where you want to live, like that. Yeah. Because I said, how am I supposed to keep the mortgage going? Well, thankfully I did, by the grace of God. But I know many, many wives have sent me emails and said, we've lost our home. We were in a homeless shelter for a while. Now we're in, going from apartment to apartment. Those are very real things that wives have to deal with.
Absolutely.
Very, very real things. And it's a tumble-down effect. The children that were abused then change locations. They change schools. They change churches. Anything normal that they felt is now not normal. Yeah. And when you think about the trickle-down effects, it's enormous.
Yeah. Yeah, those ripple effects never end.
No.
And I think
they do not.
That's what I really want people to understand. One, that they're not alone. Two, that it's so common for the spouses of abusers to want to just throw their hands up and say, you know what, like,
right.
It's better to just be quiet and just, hope that he doesn't abuse more victims.
And that's it.
Than to be out on the street or to have him file for full custody of the kids or to have him taunt me, torment me, harass me with text messages. I know what it takes to get a PFA, a protection from abuse. I've sat with women who have had guns held to their heads who could not get a PFA in Pennsylvania.
And even if you do get a PFA, it's
a piece of paper.
Right. It's a piece of paper.
You have to have a judge who upholds it.
There are real threats. In my case, I didn't have the physical abuse along with that. Many women have both. Their children have been abused, and they are dealing with very real physical abuse for themselves. That's a double whammy. These are tough situations. Also, wives of abusers are often isolated. By the choice of the abuser. They know what they're doing. They've kept the wife at home, like you said, so that she's not financially stable. She's primed to feel useless except in the home and powerless except when with her husband.
Yeah.
And that's a horrific state of being. She's made to feel very unworthy and very weak. And that's on purpose. I truly believe that abusers
Absolutely,
are crafty and mastermind this whole setup so that in the public eye, this person is this wonderful husband, wonderful father, and at home, he's priming the setting for this woman to be very weak, very codependent on her husband, very much an at-home, stay-at-home person. And I know countless wives of abusers who are in that situation, and they've emailed me and said, I just chose the easier road. I
understand that. I think to add salt to the wounds is whenever they hear from church leaders that, we just don't understand, because if things were really that bad, why in the world would you stay?
Absolutely.
That's not what they need. That's not what they need to hear.
Ever ask the wife of an abuser or an abused wife, however you want to word it, why does she stay?
Yeah.
Wrong question. There are countless reasons why she stays. And
I'll throw this in there, as an interjection. A better question is, what can we do to help?
Absolutely.
That's a much better question. That gets to the heart of the issue.
It gets to the heart of the issue. What can we do to help you in this situation? Too many times, though, because the abuser is loved and adored in the public, and most often that's the case. And you and I have been doing 100 episodes together now, and we've talked about this countless times. How often these are leaders in the community, attorneys, lawyers, preachers, ministers, elders, deacons, teachers, just very professional people, loved and adored by many. The wife has always been in the background. Yeah. She's there, but she's in the background. She sees this person who is loved and adored, and she also, as in my case too, I lived in the shadows of your dad. I wasn't in the public. I did all I could do to make him really look better and better. I felt that was my job. I did what I could do to make him be a better preacher, a better father. I gave him, and sorrowfully now, alone time with your children. I felt that was something he needed. This is what the wife does. Then there's this sudden, you see what this man has been or person has been doing, and you're shattered. The wife becomes shattered. Why doesn't she leave? How can she?
Yeah.
She's not,
I think, I agree. And I think that's the salt in the wound is, those kinds of implied accusatory statements or rhetorical questions. Why didn't you, if this was so bad, why didn't you get out? The grinding of the salt, once it's inside of the wound, is, my God, why would you come forward now and hurt the reputation of such a good man?
Yes. Which I heard countless times.
Absolutely.
Countless times. It was probably 2 months ago and now it's been how many years since your dad is in prison?
It's been almost 9. Right.
2 months ago, I still heard how bad someone felt for him, for, his whole life was shattered. And I'm thinking, you have the wrong lens on, Bella. You have the wrong lens on. You didn't see what he was. You do not see who he is. But that happens often. Wives are often not believed.
Right.
In the cases of physical abuse, a wife can go to the police battered and torn up, and the question will be asked, well, what did you do to bring this on?
Right.
And that's physical abuse. When there's mental and emotional abuse, spiritual abuse also, there are many women who are spiritually abused.
Well, that brings me to a point, because there was something that I had said in I think 2 episodes ago, and actually it was one of our patrons reached out to me and said, I know you didn't mean it this way, but I had used the term, under this pressure cooker environment,
right.
There are people who snap. There are parents who snap, and because the cases of abuse are getting incredibly violent,
definitely escalating. Yes.
And she rightfully pointed out that that's probably not an accurate term, because people don't snap and then just, one thing is common right now is parents setting their kids on fire. There was just a mother yesterday in Atlanta, Georgia.
She sick about it.
She pulled off the interstate, doused the vehicle, and set it on fire with her 14-month-old baby in the back seat. And that baby, for now, lived, but has severe burns up in Johnstown, 20 miles north of here, like 3 or 4 days ago.
I saw that.
A guy doused his kid in gasoline, 4-year-old son, and was going to burn the demon out of him. Thank God somebody intervened before he was able to do it. But, the point's well taken, and I apologize if that offended anybody. That's not what I meant. People don't just snap and then just set their kids on fire or abuse.
Right.
Abusers are abusers are abusers.
Thank you. Yes,
and
they are.
The abuse is definitely escalating under these environments.
Right.
That has nothing to do with the victims. That has nothing to do with kids being more loud and obnoxious and being bored and they're stuck in the house. That has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with the abuser. All of that falls on the shoulders of the abuser. So, that's a really good point. Whenever victims hear that, or the spouses of abusers, well, why didn't you do something? Or what did you do to bring this on? Or what did your kids do to bring this on? How were they dressed? On and on and on.
What did
they
say? What did they, what was going on?
Yeah, those are horrific things to say. To even think those things is horrific. But then to say them, it just
and to have to defend yourself.
Yeah,
I felt like when I was called in and I had to make a defense for myself, I can't tell you how horrible that was. And I know wives have to do it all the time.
Yeah.
Defend themselves. Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you see this? Why did you
Because
stay?
I couldn't.
Right. It could
I either couldn't see it, or I couldn't leave, or he threatened my life or my kids' life or my animals' lives, my pets' lives, or I could not leave. Nobody willfully
stays in an environment
in that kind
like
of environment.
That. Nobody does. If people understand and take away only one thing today, please understand that.
Yeah.
Staying in that environment is not by choice. It's by a master mind manipulation going on that has primed the conditions so that you feel you cannot leave. It's being imprisoned. Seriously, it truly is.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
There are so many mixed messages, and this is something I still struggle with. There were kindnesses done to me in our home when I didn't deserve it. Your dad would fix me breakfast in bed every morning. He would fix me an egg, a cup of coffee, and a piece of toast. And I have to tell you, there are some mornings when I wake up and I still miss that. I really do. And then I'm snapped back to reality and think, yes, he did that, but during the dark of the night, he also abused a daughter of mine.
Yeah.
And the mixed messages are so hard to sort out. And wives have to deal with that. This person who treated me this way also did the most horrific things to my child. And so that love that you felt is now not the same. You're stripped of it, but it's such a sudden stripping and shock. It's hard to do. It takes years to do it. I still, every now and then, get that feeling that I just miss that so much. And then I'm have to snap back to reality. No, I don't miss it enough. I'm thankful that he's gone. He's out of our lives, away.
Well, that brings up another point, just something that I thought about, because I've not thought about this much before because I've not had to live with it.
Right.
But it's the intimate partner who you thought you once knew or you did once know is suddenly gone. That's it's not just the money,
No.
it's not just the roof over the head, it's not just the person who you thought or who should have been the father of your children, and on and on and on. There's also that decades of intimacy that you enjoyed, and there are good times and bad times, certainly, but,
but
not all of
marriage,
it was bad, and that's all gone.
It's not all bad. And there are moments, we had a death. We had a child die. I did not have a husband or the father of that child to lean on.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, I had a grieving family, and my heart fell to below the lowest point it had ever felt. At the end of the day, I sat in an empty bed and cried week after week after week. There was nobody to share that. That was our son, our child, and no one to share that with.
Yeah.
And those are the things that, when stripped away, you think, how am I going to make it? But I don't want to end this session on a bad note, because at the end, I mean, we do have that strength. And before we close, I will say that. But that's a very big part also of the pull that pulls a wife to not leave that situation, because you've shared those most intimate moments. You've had a child with that person. You've shared sleepless nights together. You've shared fevers and broken legs and heartbreaks and all of the first, steps, all of those things together. And now it's like, it was all for what?
Yeah.
It was all a lie.
Yeah.
And that's how you believe. And it's hard to separate lie from truth.
Well, I think it's important to lay this out, for this episode, because the big message that I want people to hear is, people who've been through this, and there are lots of you who've been through this, you're not alone.
No, not at all.
This is incredibly common. But if that were the only message, I think that'd still be depressing. But the
I don't want
the other,
this,
because some people say, I don't care that I'm not alone. That just makes it worse, knowing that there are more people out there who've gone through what I've gone through. But the other side of that coin is there's hope, and there's healing.
Yes.
And you're living proof of that.
I am living proof of that. And in our next episode, I want to share how that healing came about. And it does come about. And I promise you that the strength, the inner strength, the help, there are multiple ways we get help, things we don't think of while we're going through. But there is healing, and trust me, the healing is beautiful. It truly is. Truly is. I don't know when I was going to say, I call it this silent epidemic that wives are facing, wives of abusers. And it is a silent epidemic, because your focus is on your child and your child's healing. I know that's another thing the wives of abusers go through, wives of children who have been abused. I still am not quite sure what to say when my daughters are going through a bad spell. I have one that's going through nightmares right now again, and she's going through a really rough time. And I'm not quite sure, what to say, what to do. It's touch and go. I don't want to make it harder for her. And here I am, trying to be mom, dad, everything. In fact, yesterday, one of my daughters said, gee, I had a really stellar dad, didn't I? And I thought...
it's always there. Yeah, it never goes away.
She did. She was sharing a happy moment with me, and in her words, but my dad's in prison. I can't share that with him. Look what he was. And I said, I understand, but... Then I think, well, what are the other words I should say to her? What should I be doing? So we need help guiding us also, knowing what to say and do for our children.
Yeah, very much so.
Yes, that's a very alone feeling, not knowing exactly what to do or say to help your children heal.
Yeah.
So it's another whole thing.
Well, do you have a truth bomb to leave us with?
I do have a truth bomb.
I am like on the edge of my seat, my comfortable seat right now.
You're very comfortable, padded seat where you can just prop your feet up.
You know what's interesting is before we started recording.
Don't even say it,
on
Jimmy. Video. Yes.
Do you want to tell them which chair you used?
I did. I used that chair. This is all
as soon as we went to video.
It's a setup. I wanted people to see.
She pushed me into this chair and said, "I don't want it. Boy,
Jimmy.
It hurts my back. I don't want that chair."
You had to say that, didn't you? Let's close with a really positive truth bomb. The truth bomb is you are much stronger than you think. You do have value. Your life matters. Your child's life matters. And there is help. And we'll end on that, and we will talk about help next week.
Thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you next episode.
And for listening to today's episode. Thank you to our patrons who make this podcast possible. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker and search for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. If you believe in what we do, consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron and check out the cool rewards our patrons receive. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides